Colossus is the most advanced lineup optimizer in daily fantasy sports. Lock and exclude players. Adjust player exposure to reduce risk of injury or poor performance. Customize individual projections or upload your own projections. Generate hundreds of optimal lineups in seconds. Name and save the best lineups. Create winning lineups for the top sites like DraftKings and FanDuel for free at dailyfantasycafe.com.
Hello and welcome to the Analysis of Winning Lineups podcast. I'm Big Italy 42 here, talking about some big winners. Obviously, once again, I didn't win $2 million. I didn't win $1 million. Maybe you did. If you are one of the people that won these things, I would certainly love to have you reach out to us, have you on the show, and have an interview with your thought process on the lineup. But if not, I'm sure you want to hear the breakdown of how these people won $2 million and $1 million. So I'm starting off here on FanDuel, where Jeremiah 1974 DB won $1 million with a 209.66, and even more incredibly, I always look to see, what this person's background is at the site and things like that, whatever I can find. And first thing I saw is after the weekend, it's Tuesday morning now, this person has won, and I'm assuming it's a guy with Jeremiah, but you never know. So I'm assuming that, but I see one win, one NFL win, 0 wins in every other sport. So this particular player made one lineup for $25 and won $1 million. So just saying, the whole single entry argument, multi-entry, whatever argument you may have, is certainly possible because this person did it, won $1 million. Here's how they did it. Starting off with Ben Roethlisberger, 4.1% owned, ended up with 30.66 points against the San Francisco 49ers. And as we know, one of the more popular plays in the week was Antonio Brown, who we'll get to obviously here in a few minutes. But if you're going to have a quarterback, you want to pair him with a wide receiver more often than not. And this particular player went ahead and put Roethlisberger in there, ended up with 30.66. He had 369 yards, 3 touchdown passes, 2 two-point conversions all early as well. 49ers, team that a lot of people avoided this week, especially with Roethlisberger, as you see his low ownership. Only give up 3 points to the Vikings week 1, but didn't take long. Steelers had 16 points before you blinked an eye in this one. But great performance by Roethlisberger at low ownership there. So this was a great one. And Le'Veon Bell was out for this one, so maybe we see more of a balanced attack, and I expect that we will. But for this week, Roethlisberger was obviously the perfect play. Won $1 million for someone. Adrian Peterson up next, and this is another scenario where recency bias came into play. Adrian Peterson, as we know, despite the fact that he's aging, one of the best, if not the most talented running back in the league, depending on who you ask. Obviously, all anecdotal. I'm not saying that he is, but either way, he was the most expensive at $9,000, which kept his ownership level down 6.6%. And he did not find the end zone. Well, he did find the end zone. A guy called back on a penalty, but did not end up scoring a touchdown. But what he did end up doing was put up 192 yards against the Lions. One of the best performances of the week. We saw the Lions defense look great week 1 for the first half against San Diego. They've looked terrible ever since then, and Peterson had no problem gashing them. 58 of those yards came on 2 catches. So this is Adrian Peterson, and we saw has a huge role in this offense. Big-time performance there. He ended up totaling 18.2 points. Next guy at $5,200, 0.6% owned. This is one of the guys that really set this lineup apart. Dion Lewis against Buffalo. People were looking at this Buffalo matchup as a very tough one for the Patriots, and it was a tough one, but Tom Brady, the rest of the offense really asserted themselves. 40 points in this one, and Dion Lewis had his hand in it a big way. 6 catches, 138 total yards, and this was a guy, like I said, no one really looked at, and Lewis had a solid game in week 1, not a great performance, but this is a guy who really showed up in this one, ended up with 20.8 points, like I said, 0.6% ownership, so very few lineups had him at all. Next up, Antonio Brown, kind of alluded to him earlier. Obviously, pairing your wide receiver and quarterback makes a lot of sense. He had only 195 yards, a touchdown, a 2-point conversion as well. He ended up with a massive performance, 32 points. He was the most expensive, and rightfully so. Certainly paid that off. The QB wide receiver pairing together, 62.66 fantasy points on FanDuel. Monster score there. Cash line in a lot of these things were around 110, 115 points. So that's more than halfway there right there with these 2 players. Next up, the darling of the week. One of the darlings of the week. The one that some people saw coming. Larry Fitzgerald at 6.1% ownership. He's only $5,900. 3 touchdown passes from Carson Palmer in this one. 8 catches, 112 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Cardinals scored 48 points, as you noticed. These are all the teams that scored a lot of points. This lineup was chock full of players from the Patriots, the Steelers, and, one more guy that we'll get to here in a few minutes, and obviously Arizona here with Larry Fitzgerald. But 33.2 points for him, and, he looked great. It wasn't even just one of those fluke-type performances. You catch a couple touchdown passes in the red zone. He was dragging defenders. He was making acrobatic catches. He looked like the Larry Fitzgerald that we've seen before, that maybe some of us, maybe myself included, didn't think existed anymore. But he looked explosive. He looked great. Absolutely huge performance for him there. Next up was the guy that I want to say no one saw coming. Obviously, someone saw it coming. He was on both of the winning rosters, but maybe that's due to his price, whatever it may be. The Browns scored 21 points on Sunday, and all 3 of the touchdowns belonged to Travis Benjamin. 2 of them through the air from those patented Johnny Manziel, drop back in the pocket, scramble around backwards, and throw the ball as hard as you can. Touchdowns. And he caught 2 of those, 3 total catches there. Also ran back a kick for a touchdown on a punt return. And all three of these wide receivers ended up with over 30 fantasy points, 32, 33.2, and 31. Absolutely ridiculous performance from these 3 guys. Not going to be very often where you find that type of production from 3 wide receiver spots, especially their prices, but this was a hell of a performance. Great job here. Next up, tight end. You know this name by now, at least I hope you do. Rob Gronkowski, $8,300. He's only 11.5% owned, which is a low number for him, a number that we typically see much higher, but this was about as tough a matchup as Gronkowski has ever or will ever see, and he certainly did not disappoint for those who ponied up the $8,300 for him. 7 for $113 and a touchdown, and this one's self-explanatory. Rob Gronkowski, he's in my mind, the most uncoverable player in all of football, and he proved it this week in a tough matchup, showing up big time with 20.8 points. Next up was about as chalk of a play as you're going to get in this lineup. Josh Brown, popular men's salary play, 20.3% against Atlanta. And this one was simple. He made 2 field goals and 2 extra points. That's it. That's all the kicker talk I'd like to have here. But this last pick I absolutely love. It was not one that I had on any of your rosters. The New York Jets against the Indianapolis Colts. This is a Jets defense that forced 5 turnovers in week 1. But everyone said, it's the Browns. It's Johnny Manziel. This defense isn't that good. But we've seen this defense. They are a talented defense. And obviously, Darrelle Revis back in town. Lots of great playmakers on that defense. They forced 5 more off Andrew Luck and company. And at 0.9% owned, put up 14 points. And on a week where there was very few defenses that paid off, all of the chalk defenses, the Rams, the Dolphins, the Ravens, all the disappointment. Barely even breaking 0 points, a lot of these guys. So this was the key. Obviously, that's what did it late on Monday night, 14 points. So congratulations there. Jeremiah, 1974, DB, $1 million on FanDuel. Next up, we've got our $2 million winner on DraftKings. And we'll go ahead and shout out M. Digiaco, is how I'm going to say it. I'm not sure. Second place winner did take home $1 million. Really the key between these two, big difference was Rams ended up with 4 points. And we saw for the winning team and the Ravens, on the number 2 team, finished about 2 points behind, -1. Couple points changing hands, maybe $1 million on that last touchdown by Derek Carr. I'm not sure if that was actually the case, but seems like it was, at least at the time. Big swing once again. We saw last week it was a meaningless Carlos Hyde carry that changed $1 million in hands. But either way, starting off at the top, Marcus Mariota, Cleveland against Tennessee, and we saw Marcus Mariota get off to a really slow start. He got sacked 7 times, but 257 yards, a late touchdown, his second touchdown of the game. Ended up with 18.18 points, and at his cheap price tag, that was more than enough to pay things off there. So well done, 4.7% ownership, very low. Next guy, 77 rushing yards, 15 receiving yards, but 3 touchdowns. DeAngelo Williams, 31.2 points. That was a ballsy play there, especially because this was a 49ers defense that looks great in week 1. Granted, yes, this was the Vikings. This week is the Steelers, but DeAngelo Williams is a guy we haven't seen a huge performance. This is a huge point performance. He wasn't necessarily dominant on the ground, but when he got his opportunities, he took advantage. So great job there, very low ownership. Next guy, one of those guys that a lot of people love to play in GPPs, myself included. Danny Woodhead had himself a solid game, not a spectacular game, but did exactly what was needed here to help someone win $2 million. The Dugan brothers, so I'm guessing maybe there's 2, maybe there's 3. Either way, whichever one, however many there are, they're all getting themselves a nice cut of this $2 million. But Danny Woodhead ended up with 68 receiving yards on 6 catches, 36 rushing yards, 16.4 points, just under 11% owned. Great job there. Travis Benjamin, the next one. Obviously, bonus points for 100-plus wide receiver or running back total yards. Or not total yards, receiving or rushing yards. But Travis Benjamin did get that with 115, 35.5 points, 0.8% ownership. You gotta love that. Antonio Brown was the next one. We know the story here. He had 39.5 because he got the bonus, of course, on DraftKings and the full point PPR compared to half on FanDuel. Next up was Julian Edelman, 16.5%. Mentioned New England earlier with Rob Gronkowski. Edelman had 19 targets, caught 12 of them for 97 yards and 2 scores. And 33.9 points. He had a really, I won't say a really cheap price tag, but compared to some other volume guys, very, very reasonable tag there. Rob Gronkowski was the next 113 yards. Mentioned him already. 13.7%, a little bit higher ownership on DraftKings there, probably due to a flex spot. I'm sure you saw some people throw him in there. And then last up, Larry Fitzgerald once again, highest scoring wide receiver on the week, 40.2 points, 8 for 112 and 3 touchdowns, like I mentioned earlier. And then the last one was a disappointment, but in this case, just good enough. The St. Louis Rams, 4 points, 22% ownership. They had 2 sacks and a fumble. Really the only thing that got them any points. Pretty lackluster performance outside of that against the Redskins. So congratulations to our winners. $2 million to the Dugan brothers. $1 million winner, Jeremiah 1974 DB. Check out the rest of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com. Lots of strategy content for NFL, MLB until the end here, college football. Lots of great stuff to help you win this week and every other week. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you guys next time.